Yeah, you're the worst person to talk chocolate with because
No, yeah, it's a totally pointless conversation. Although apparently you're like shattering pieces of taffy in your mouth and eating blood, so who knows if you actually are the right person to talk to about candy either. Do you like
no,
Pop Rocks? Are you harming yourself in order to eat candy?
but this is the thing about food, right? It's part of the experience of eating it. Like the Toblerone is all that much better because of how dangerous it is.
Sure, it's like that little bird that you're supposed to eat fully, and the bones in the
Yeah,
beak cuts your mouth, and
yeah,
part of the experience of eating the
yeah.
bird is the blood from harming your mouth. Yeah, gross.
Exactly. And I feel like Pop Rocks could be a little better too if they had a bit more kick. Like there's a 1 in 10 chance you're gonna lose a tooth.
More of an explosion.
Yeah, more explosion. But it should be an
Right.
experience, I think. And like that,
Sure.
could experiment with your candies.
That's a weird one too, is there's weird saliva science. Your mouth heals a lot faster than the rest of you, and they're pretty sure it's saliva based, but they don't actually know why. But yeah, anytime you like cut and hurt your mouth, that thing heals real quick.
Yeah, saliva's a good healer.
Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human elements. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems. And I can't think of two better people to do that than Kevin and I.
Which is a scary thought. So if you'd like to come and be a third person with a topic you'd like to discuss or rant about, drop us a note and we'll see if we can get you on a future episode. You can go to acceptancepod.com/guest and submit your ideas. And a quick reminder, whether this is your first episode or you've been listening for a while, we wouldn't say no to your going and dropping 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a nice review. And if you want to leave us a bad review, remember the name of the podcast is Not Another D&D Podcast.
Also, tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check us out. Some of the best podcasts out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it.
On this week's show, we'll be discussing self-driving cars, how they work today, what the pros and cons and ethical concerns are, and looking at the state of the industry.
Yeah, self-driving cars, it's a big one for me. I think the problem for me is I care about where it goes. And I think it fixes highway problems. I don't know if we'll get to that today, but fixes the...
Human beings are terrible drivers. We shouldn't be in charge of these 7-ton death machines, and cars are getting worse. You look at that image of the 1991 Ford F-150 compared to the 2024 Ford F-150, and it is like 7 feet taller and unnecessarily, these are in the name of safety. We've created these giant cars to protect us, but they kill everyone else. And it's because we're all bad drivers. And I'm fully on board with the idea of a self-driving car future. We'll talk about whether we're there.
Yeah, get into it.
But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. This is a segment we like to call Competitive Analysis, where we'll look at a product or app or technology and talk through our impressions, how we think some of the product and engineering decisions were made to arrive at how the thing works, and share our thoughts on how good or bad we think it is. So today's topic is self-driving cars. I figure break this conversation into a couple of pieces, just start with just explaining to people what the technology actually is, how it works today. Obviously, companies are keeping this fairly proprietary, but we have some pretty good insight into all of the different pieces that go into it, and then we can get into sort of whether it's a good idea today, in the future. There's some ethical concerns I think we have to talk through. And then I'd also just I think we can look at the industry and see what's the state of things. We got Tesla, we got robo-taxis out there. There's some stuff that we can talk through. So the first part of it is just understanding sort of what are called, I've Googled a bunch of this. I'm by no means claiming to be an expert on all of this, but I did a bunch of reading before this to start to walk through this for people. So there seem to be about 5 core components to any of these companies' self-driving cars. Again, there's patents out there, but a lot of this is just people inferring the data science and mathematics that are going into all of this as papers get published and things like that. So no one can tell you for sure whether GM's car does X versus Y, Tesla, Waymo, all of those companies have their own things, but these seem to be the 5 buckets of what it requires to have a self-driving car. So the first one is computer vision, which is how the computer sees. It's sort of self-explanatory. It's seeing objects, and there's a bunch of things that go into this. I don't know, Greener, if you've done much with computer vision models in any of your companies, if you've seen how this kind of stuff works.
No, No, but it's actually fascinating, right? It's the applications are going to grow over the years.
But it's crazy what it does today, right? So there's different types of algorithms. There's one called, the acronym is YOLO, because engineers love a good joke. You only look once. And what this is the computer scans through an image and breaks it down into, I don't think it breaks it down quite to the like pixel level, but it looks for clusters of, common colors and all of those kinds of things, and starts to build what are called bounding boxes, which is basically it draws a rectangle around, hey, I think these 512 dark brown pixels are all a shoe, and that bright thing in the top corner, that is the sun. And like it's trying to identify, using these algorithms, these bounding boxes, and looking at the image in all of this. And then there's a thing called non-maximum suppression, NMS, and apparently that is another type of algorithm that goes through and, I mean, it does what it says. It suppresses the non-maximum, which means it's looking for high confidence scores. So a lot of data science models will tell you, I'm only 80% sure that this is a dog, and so this suppression algorithm goes through and says, no, we're really not quite sure what's going on in this little clump of brown pixels. We got to look at the next big bounding box, and the next big bounding box has lighter browns and darker browns, and you realize, oh, that's a shoe. So like these algorithms go through and try to match up all of these little bounding boxes. And if you've ever seen an example of this video, like if you've ever seen like a, high-tech sci-fi movie where they're doing facial recognition and the little box jitters across the video as it tracks your face as you walk through the screen, that's what those bounding boxes are. And it's trying to identify everything. And it's fascinating and kind of terrifying because it is just probabilities. It's hoping that the algorithm has done enough to recognize what a dog looks like, what a child looks like, what a stop sign looks like, and matching up to what it's seeing in the actual image. I am also just curious. I don't know if you ever think about this kind of stuff. We don't know how the human brain works, but I'd be fascinating if there's like actual neuroscience trying to figure out that the human brain does something similar. Like, is this when babies develop object permanence? They are like looking for, clearly not bounding boxes, but they're trying to notice the pattern of colors and shapes and turn that into something. I don't know. This part of it is super fascinating to me, even if it is also slightly terrifying that it is all just probability scores. And what happens when the probability score gets too low?
Yeah, there's a challenge with this too, right? Because humans were also subject to perspective. So it's probably really common for any sports fan where you're watching a game and sometimes it takes you a second to figure out which direction the ball's traveling in, because the perspective you're at, it can take a couple of seconds to realize, like, actually the ball's moving towards me, but I thought it was moving away because the angle I'm seeing the ball at, right? It happens in soccer a lot, where it's like, that's going in the top corner, wait a minute, it's a corner kick.
It
like,
fully flew over.
Yeah,
Right.
it did not go where my brain expected it. So with us being the best kind of computers for vision, right, today,
Right.
you would assume then that the computers are subject to that, right? And I think there was an example of, if you have a truck that has an image on it, how does the computer know that the image is an image on a truck versus, oh, that really is open road? Right,
exactly. Which would be a fascinating way for, there's got to be like a Fast and Furious 13 where they trick the self-driving car that they're chasing after into doing something stupid because they paint on the back of their van doors some image of something other. It's basically the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote painting a thing on a wall.
It is. It's painting the tunnel on the wall, right? Yeah,
exactly. And then there's other stuff that goes into this. So there's, we have two eyes, and that's how we see depth, basically, is because we have two sources that we can triangulate. There's a bunch of math that goes into why that works. I've never understood it, but basically, they have to do that for these computer vision things too, right? Is they have to actually have two cameras so that you can have 2 points of reference and try to calculate a bunch of that kind of stuff, which gets into the second part of self-driving cars, which is called sensor fusion. And so basically you have cameras taking visible light, you have radar signals, which is like, when the cop pulls you over, it's because they used a radar gun to see how fast you were going, and something called LiDAR, which is where radar is radio signals, LiDAR is some kind of like light at a different frequency than the visual spectrum, I think. And basically each one of those things is good at different tasks in different conditions. So the camera is really good at seeing fine details. The camera will tell you pretty accurately exactly where the curb is because it can distinguish all of that, but it's not good in bad weather or low lighting situations like morning or evening. And so they have then radar, which, works in the dark, works through bad weather. Radar radio waves, the way that they work, go through a ton of things. And so, radar is able to, not figure out, I don't think it can't do like the lines that are painted on the road clearly, but it can actually detect, okay, there's a house in front of you, right? Like the big stuff radar is pretty good at, and then LiDAR is somewhere in the middle apparently, does 3D mapping of everything, and is basically focused on distance. So the camera tries to tell you what's around you, the radar tries to tell you how fast is everything else going, and the LiDAR tries to tell you where are things in position. And so this is where it gets full on math nerd. There's entire white papers you could go read if you were super interested in things called Kalman filters, Kalman filters. And basically they've got a bunch of algorithms to try to figure out how do you merge all three signals, the camera, the LiDAR, and the radar, and figure out how to take again, this is where it gets a little scary. It's taking like the estimate and the probability and saying, okay, I think this thing over on the left is 10 feet away and I'm 98% confident in that. And these filters basically constantly do that evaluation, then wait, whatever, 300 milliseconds, get the next set of images and compare and say, okay, well, it's been 300 milliseconds. We should now be 9.9 feet away. Let me look at the image and figure out, am I correct? Are we now 9.9 feet away? And it basically trains itself on the fly to figure out if it's perceiving reality and making these decisions. And that's a ton of math and that's a ton of things. And you hope someone didn't forget to carry the one in one of the equations in these algorithms. But that is how this thing is doing. It's trying to merge these three signals to figure out what's going on in the world around you. How fast is the oncoming car? Where is the oncoming car? And where's the curb? Where are the lines on the highway that you should be staying inside of? There's also other things that they've had to do. So when the camera can't see through the rain, it has to over adjust for the LiDAR and the radar. And that is all predictive models. It is just math, hoping that you're right. If you injure, and damage one of the components, it'll try to adjust as best it can. But you are now, entirely dependent on an algorithm, hoping that it predicts what the LiDAR should be saying. Kind of creepy.
For our listeners who are not technical or don't really think in terms of how computer vision might work, but some of the challenges for us techies, and trust me, the guys who specialize in this are way further ahead, but I'll give you a simple sort of problem to think about. In terms of 2D, we often think about the XY, right? Like the positioning on the screen of something is however many X and however many Y. It's like a GPS location for your cursor per se, like XY. Right. But with computer vision, you also have the Z, right? Which is the how far away is something or how close is something, and then which, where's the direction? What direction is this object moving in? What's the speed, velocity of that? So there's a lot of challenges in these models that go far beyond like that 2D vision. So it's remarkable. And actually, I would argue that I trust the consistency of the computer to do the calculations on the model more frequently than humans.
See, this is the part is I don't know that we know that. We don't know what is the mental throughput power of the human brain. And you also better hope that Elon didn't cheap out on the GPUs this quarter.
No.
And they're slower than, we don't know that actual throughput. I would agree with you that there is a day at some point in the future, possibly. The problem is I don't know that we know this answer, but sure, someday at some point in the future, a GPU, CPU moving at the speed of light, in theory, should be processing every millisecond these algorithm calculations, and there's probably a day in the future at which the computer does that better than the human brain. Your problem with human beings is we get distracted. Not that our brain isn't processing things necessarily.
No. But I would say my original statement, yes, it will get better in time and eventually surpass the majority. But what I'm saying is the worst human driver pitted up against the worst decision of this software, I still think the human makes worse decisions.
I think we are going to get to evidence that that's not true currently. That might be true in the future. And the amount of the human brain has evolved to self-correct, and we've evolved medicine and we know how to fix our own brain bugs a lot of the times. You're now entirely dependent on someone not having written a bug into the YOLO algorithm.
I'm okay with the bug, but this is not driving a car. But let's use the example, and I don't remember the airline, but the Russian guy who allowed his kids to fly the plane, screwing with the autopilot, which shut the autopilot off and everybody crashed and died. This software is not going to do stupid shit like that.
Yes, I'm not disagreeing agreeing there's a version, the pros and cons of this, the pros of taking bad human decision making out of this, fully agreed. I'm simply challenging that I don't know that we know how fast the brain works, and that I am not convinced currently that NVIDIA is producing GPUs on the actual same level as the human brain. It is constantly having to reevaluate things at the millisecond level, and you have evolved in millions of years to react quickly to things. The human reaction, I'm saying I don't know. I don't know. I haven't read enough of the science out there to understand the difference between those two things. And if it's a situation like Toyota, where Toyota got investigated by NASA and NASA found all of the situations in which it had bugs in its systems, then your ability to hope that the AI that is perceiving the oncoming semi-truck doesn't have those same issues. And you can be a drunk driver, your perception and reaction times are reduced. You can be, there's plenty of situations in which human beings on both sides of the accident are the problem. And I think I would agree with you in the long term that there's a fully well-tested version of software that is better than those people. That day is not today.
Really? You don't think that the best software is better than the worst driver?
But that's a meaningless comparison. The worst driver is a drunk masshole who is allowed to leave the bar. This is the argument we were having the other week about Boeing and things. Like, you're identifying a bad thing, which is we allow drunk drivers, why there aren't breathalyzers on every single car, why there aren't a bunch of other things. You're trying to compare a bunch of things, and I'm simply saying the average driver, and you going and picking the worst moron who's should never be given a driver's license in the first place, that's not 90% of us. So
Yeah,
no, it's not better than
not
90% of us.
It's not single digit percentage either.
No, you're
America's
arguing with me.
infamous,
You're
right?
arguing with me about a thing we don't disagree with.
Yeah.
I'm
No, I'm just
fully on
saying.
board that humans are bad at that, and we should eventually let it replace us as drivers. We're not there yet, because I would disagree with you that I don't think there's any evidence that the GPU is faster than the human brain for 90% of us.
I just don't think it's as high as 90%. I think they've closed the
Fine.
gap. 50.
No, we're going to talk about some statistics. It's bad out there. Yeah, no. Eventually, though, I would love it if it was true. And there's plenty of liberals who are like, why do we need self-driving cars? Invest in trains and subways and buses and all of that. And that's also true. That's absolutely also true. Public transit should be an option for a bunch of people.
Yeah,
but there are plenty of situations. You're not going to undo the car culture of this country in a decade. In the meantime, if I can get a self-driving car taking most of the morons off the road, I will want to do that eventually.
they're the same liberals who want to spend like $50 billion on whale sperm research.
No one's ever tried to spend $50 billion on whale sperm research.
I'm
No.
pretty sure.
You come to me with your Fox News nonsense and I will shoot it down and edit it out of the episode. All right, so the next one up is localization, the way that we actually figure out where the car is. How do you precisely geolocate the car to know exactly where you are if you're in the middle of correct lane and all of that? And it uses a combination of things. It does GPS, it does maps, and it does the computer vision. So to me, this is definitely one of the more insane parts of how all of this works, because GPS is not accurate enough. GPS at most can get you down to 1 or 2 meters, and that means you're definitely going to hit the curb, you're going to drift into the oncoming traffic, because 1 to 2 meters is like 2 to 3 feet. So not specific enough. So then they have to start to do things like landmark identification, where they're mapping what they see in the computer vision. So, oh, that's a power line, that's a curb, that's a traffic light, and all of that tries to help them figure out, okay, we tend to be, 5 feet away from the traffic signal poles and power lines and all that kind of stuff, and try to figure it out. One of the other things that they do, and I think this one's the most insane part of this, is locating your car on the road is oftentimes dependent on the car having an HD map of every street that you could possibly drive on, because what it's doing is it's taking the computer vision and matching the pattern it sees in the computer vision and trying to match that up to an HD map that it has of what it should look like. And because we're not precise enough to be able to figure all of that out, because we're relying on the computer vision noticing the lanes, the computer vision trying to figure out, okay, yeah, that is a street corner at a 4-way intersection. I'm pretty sure that was supposed to happen in 200 feet. It's been 200 200 feet and they're matching it up to the map. That's how they're having these cars drive. But that does mean any change to the traffic pattern that's not been scanned into the HD map database will throw the self-driving car off. So basically, you and I lived in Boston in the 2000s. You would not have been able to drive a self-driving car through Boston for like 20 years because those roads were changing as they did the big dig every 5 days. And so because it's not actually intelligence, it's artificial non-intelligence, it can't actually handle the fact that we build and change our roads all the time. There's an accident and the police show up and put out barriers and route you around a different way. The detour signs don't stop you from driving down the road, but you all know as human beings to stop and take the detour. The car is not equipped yet to deal with the fact that if it isn't in its existing database, it doesn't know what to do, which is why most of these self-driving car tests have been in urban areas where you're less likely to have, like, Fifth Avenue has run the way it's run in New York for the past 150 years. It's reliable. You can know that that's going to be what happens. Even in Seattle, though, right now, they're doing a ton of construction downtown on how all of our lanes work, so we have bus lanes, and that would throw all these self-driving cars off because it needs something to compare to. And that also then opens the question to me of like, okay, cool, are you doing Wi-Fi downloads every 4 hours as they remap your area? You can't possibly drive in rural areas where I don't know. I'm super puzzled by localization and how all of that works.
Yeah, it's kind of cool actually though, because I think when I'm looking at the video, the sort of computer vision output in my Tesla, right? Like it's picking up on the cones and everything. So I assume they obviously have a recognition of what these objects are, and I guarantee you cones is in the software somewhere fairly prevalent, right? So it is recognizing those things. But yeah, I can't say like any of the times that I've been going by areas that have shifted because of roadworks that my car's ever had a problem. I will actually say part of the challenge I have is sometimes I worry that my car is overconfident. Like it's too sure of itself. So
where's this going?
Where I might be going 35 miles an hour, the car's like, no, f it. Let's do 40. And I'm like, no, there's some traffic, there's some roadworks. Let's slow down a little bit. But I also recognize that there's a little bit of comfort in how confident my car is in that situation where I'm like, I trust this software.
Is this where you out yourself as a Tesla owner and I haven't known that this entire time?
Yeah, I own a Tesla.
I had no idea that was true.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's so sad.
Wait a minute, do I need to turn my colors out? I need to do the tech bro thing. Oh yeah, of course I have a Tesla.
Oh my gosh, of course you do.
I wouldn't fight for these things unless I fully immersed myself in them.
Cool.
Yeah, I trust my Tesla.
All right. So the next component is called path planning. Basically, where should the car go? There's a couple of pieces to this. So the first is perception, know where we are. And so that is basically situating yourself in where in the real world you're going and where you're headed to, and, you know, the perception of that computer vision stuff. Prediction is trying to estimate the world around you and understand, okay, where's that oncoming car going? What's its current trajectory, its current speed? Is it slowing down because it has a red light or not? All of those things are part of the prediction of what it thinks is going to happen around it. And then it decides on what's called behavior and trajectory. And so it says, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? Where are we headed? What would be the behavior that I would want to do? And then what are the possible trajectories of how to get me to that destination? And basically there's a dozen algorithms that I'm not going to go into all of them, but they basically start to figure out, okay, what is the safest path? What is the legal path? What is the feasible path? What's convenient? What's efficient? And basically takes all of these different factors together to try to plan your path. Where is it going to send the car? Are you on the highway stuck behind the person doing 50 miles an hour? Is it clear for you to pull into the left lane and pass them? Is the, right-hand turn coming up and you should move over to the right lane so you can turn right at the upcoming intersection? It's planning all of those paths in the ways that make the most sense. And this is another one example where I'm fully on board with this. If the technology is good, this is great. No one knows how to zipper onto the highway. No one knows how to deal with the passing lane and get out of the passing lane once you've passed the car you're trying to pass. Everyone waits until the very last minute to go from the far left lane to the far right lane in order to take the exit that they didn't notice or that they don't care is coming up quickly. So path planning is one of the ones that I'm like, yes, this is great. I would love if path planning had like peer-to-peer communication to tell you what the car in front's planned path is, and you all zipper and merge and do a bunch of stuff. You all could be doing 120 on the highway if all of the cars around you were talking with one another about their paths and making those plans. I love this. This part makes total sense if the technology is there.
Yeah, Yeah, actually, you went to where I was going to go to, which is I think of the path planning piece as it's sort of the introduction to where I would consider the bulk of accidents happen, right? It's that decision
Yeah.
point. And then you touched upon what I was going to say, which is I'm a lot more confident in the path planning if all of the cars are on the network. And I'll give an
Right.
example. Anybody who's lived in Massachusetts, you know that when you indicate, the reaction that you get from the person in the lane to the right of you and behind you is not the one you would expect.
Is to speed up.
It's actually the opposite. So
Yep.
how do they code the software
Right.
to understand that? And we do, right? Like as massholes, when you're driving there, you know that if I indicate to change lanes, the guy in the right hand lane is going to speed up because it's like, how dare you change lanes? So now,
Right.
so what's my behavior then? Is I don't indicate. I don't let them know that I'm doing that because I know they're going to close the gap.
Which is also bad.
It's also really bad, but the software doesn't understand those idiosyncrasies about humans. And that's my
Right.
problem with not all of the cars are included in the network, right?
No, I'm fully on board that eventually it should all just be networked chains of, like, there's stuff that I think eventually you all know that you're going to, you're going from Boston to Providence and you should get onto 93 South. And if 5 of you are all headed that direction, why aren't you all just linking together into a chain and going 150 miles in the far left lane? Because you don't need to pull over, you don't need to stop. You should have the car in the back helping accelerate the car in the front. You would save on gas economy. There's a ton of stuff that would make sense if these things were able to talk to one another. Again, that's called a train. We should also invest in better mass transit. But there are, I'm a car guy. I enjoy road trips. A train is not going to take me to the places I want to go with the car. I'm fully on board with cars. I do think there's a million situations where mass transit would be a better solution, but I also think there's too much stuff to go and do, too far and spread out. This country is massive. No one really appreciates how big this freaking country is that we all drive through. This is not an anti-car screed as much as it probably should be in some places.
I think some of the challenge there too is the ratio of people to cars on the road, right? This is the one that I have a challenge with, and I'm not sure if self-driving cars fixes that without the local authorities just sort of mandating the change, right? And I always think of the last 9 miles into Boston. It's the outer ring road is what, the 95. 95 is the outer ring road to Boston, and that's where a lot of commuters will dump their cars and take the green line in. But I think it should also be build the super parking lots out there, right? And then the self-driving cars, if I'm going the last 10 miles, then I should be in a car with 4 other people who are going downtown, right? And then, like you say, the speed is regulated, but we don't need all of those cars in the city. It's generally one person per car on a morning, right? Carpooling sucks. It doesn't work.
Right. You're describing a subway. that is mass transit. So you've solved it with mass transit, and now you also have decided the expense of the gasoline of the single car that can take 4 people. So this is where I'm saying when you live in a suburb of Omaha, which is I shouldn't be so reductive. There are probably plenty of places, but our entire country is designed differently depending on whether you are inside I-95 in Boston, on Manhattan, and in the outer boroughs of New York, in the suburbs of Chicago. Like, there are places where the answer is absolutely mass transit. You do not need a car. You should be able to get anywhere that you need to within 5 blocks of what you're doing. But then if you're in a suburb, how do you get to the grocery store? You need a car. There's not going to be a bus that, right? Like, there are cases where we are just physically designed incorrectly.
Yeah, but I don't want to ride on the T with those kind of people.
Then pay the $12 to ride the version that's the premium Excella class. Yeah, that's solved through tiers of horrifying class systems, you British weirdo.
I want to ride the electric Mercedes the last 10 miles. I don't want to be on a T with a bunch of humans. Like,
that's nice. Good for you. Tough.
Just saying.
No. All right. So the final 5th piece of most self-driving car technology is referred to as control, which is basically how do you actually physically move the car. So there's a bunch of different systems. The 2 biggest ones are called PID, proportional integral derivative. And basically that is, it's used in a couple of different places, but the most common situation you'll see is literally how do you turn the wheel? How do you know, is the skill you all learn as 15 and 16-year-olds is you can't yank the wheel 45 degrees to the side because that's going to veer you over to the side. So there's this process where the car knows I'm not in the right lane, I need to move into the, I'm not in the correct lane, I need to move in, or whatever. I need to move the car to get into the correct position. And apparently the way these algorithms work is what's called proportional, the P in PID. Proportional just simply says, oh, I need to turn the steering wheel left to move us left and get me into the correct position. But apparently it's not smart enough to actually know how to do that correctly. So proportional would just constantly turn the steering wheel left. And what ends up happening is then in a non-PID system, the car ends up sort of ping-ponging from side to side of the lane because it goes, oh, I need to go left. And then it goes too far left, so it turns and goes right. And it's going too far right, so it needs to go back left. It does this weird ping-pong thing. So they introduced derivative, which is some control that makes it more gradual as you smooth into the lane. And then there's something called integral, which also corrects for something else. There's weird things that does some magic math. And I think it figures out, like, if your wheel was out of alignment and you just had a natural drift to the left, it'll figure that kind of stuff out and keep you centered. So there's an entire algorithm that basically figures out how to keep you in the center of the lane. I hope it's better than the one that's in my Lexus. My Lexus does ping pong between lanes and it's really annoying. I turn that feature off. And then there's another thing called model predictive control. And basically it is the thing that controls the gas pedal, the brake pedal, the steering wheel. There are these things that have to predict whether or not, going back to the path planning, is it safe to accelerate, all of those kinds of things. They're called actuators, which are the controls over the actual devices like the steering wheel and the gas pedal. So those are the things that actually control the car through a bunch of, again, algorithms. And this is the problem I have is as soon as there's a bug in one of those things, now it's a human being's fault other than yours or the drunk driver that ruins your car. And we'll get into the ethics and some of the weird situations that you're going to be in as a company. And you're entirely dependent on the software engineer not writing bugs or having their bugs caught in a QA process. And we both work in software and know how often that doesn't happen. And that is my fundamental problem with this is it feels like we need 1 billion miles of self-driving cars worth of QA to catch enough of the bugs. I think this was the thing that NASA found in that Toyota story from a couple of months ago that we covered is there were so many millions of variables involved that the software could not possibly account for that they simply gave up on testing. And that's scary.
Yeah, this is the one of the examples of where I think my car is overconfident. Is the minute I turn the auto drive on, it's pretty responsive. Like it makes a decision right away.
Right.
I'm kind of waiting for it to ease in where I'm like, oh, okay, cool, boot up, get your variables,
Right.
set all the parameters. It doesn't. It's
Yep.
just like, here I go. It's like a little child who's waited to drive and like the thing will switch lanes right away on me. Really confident. And I'm like a bit too overconfident for me where I'm like,
Yep.
just stay in the lane for 30 more seconds, damn it. I'm getting used to the
Right.
idea you're driving. I still, you'll always hate me for this, but I still
Uh-huh.
trust it more now than I do the worst drivers. But I live in South Florida too, which maybe is part of the reason.
Because the drivers in Florida are great.
Everybody knows it's famous. The drivers in Massachusetts are assholes and deliberately make it hard for you to drive, but the
Yeah.
people in South Florida, they don't know any better.
Just morons behind the
They're
wheel.
just morons behind the
Yeah,
wheel.
that sounds right.
And so, yeah, my confidence in the software is there already.
Sure, cool. Good luck with that.
I mean, fortunately for me, I think it's moving as fast as I would like it to, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah, it is. It's terrifying.
it's not terrifying. I think,
You've seen the video of the Tesla being the only self-driving car that didn't stop for the fake child in the crosswalk, right? Like,
yeah,
the
but
technology isn't there.
there's gonna be a couple of
No, that's bad. That's not how it should work. Microsoft Word doesn't kill you when it accidentally screws up.
I know, but you're asking it for a higher quality than what it's replacing.
Yes. Do you not understand why that would be the case? Why they shouldn't be expected to spend the next 5 years on closed courses devising all of these strategies safely to test it and then roll it out so that its safety record, which we will get to, is currently worse.
Eh,
Yeah.
eh.
Yeah.
Should the kid have been in the crosswalk in the first place? I don't know.
Definitely a legal statement you should make.
I think the 7 accidents that happened because of the software lead to better software. And you're saying that that's too many.
And I think you could have the 7 accidents with the cardboard people in the controlled track and get the exact same amount of data. And it's a choice to put it on the road before it's gone through enough QA.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. They can find a better way to simulate those 7 accidents, but then we also should be accepting of the edge conditions where people will say, like, well, why didn't they code for that? And I'm like, some software systems are actually. It's kind of like the processed food thing again, right? Like you could never have QA processed food over 1 year. It was never going to work. Anything that goes into your body and then impacts your DNA was always going to be a multi-generational test. It always had to be. And so I'm okay with that. Like there's going to be edge conditions to the software where it's like, well, we never thought that could even happen. It's like those signs when you go somewhere and you're like, somebody had to do that for there to be a sign.
Yes.
It's
right.
just an edge condition that has to happen. You will never find it in testing.
That's not totally true. We have the FDA forces you to do testing of drugs and other things. There are things where you get people to volunteer and take on the risk themselves. The problem is, no. The problem is you chose to possibly be the placebo versus the whatever on the drug. You as the pedestrian did not choose to participate in the Tesla self-driving beta.
I see where you're going with that. I'll come back to that in a second. But when you see what the Food, Drug, and Administration will approve of the animal that you can eat, even though the cow has a tumor on its head, but it's like, yeah, but the rest of the body, that's far away from the tumor, right? Like they're the edge conditions I'm talking about where it's like, yeah, cool, there's this control body but they're also making questionable decisions with edge conditions, like tumors on the head, you can still eat the ass, right? Sounds bad when I say you can still eat the ass, but you know what I mean, of the cow.
I'm not disagreeing that there are versions of the FDA that could be better. I'm not saying that all of these authorities are 100% perfect, but I am saying they at least are trying to put things in place. They're making an effort. We can make the effort better if Republicans would stop defunding the government. And in 9 times out of 10, those systems in place give people the choice. And that's all I'm saying is when you put these cars out on this road, I don't opt into your beta.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about the person who dies who's not part of the experiment. That has to be, they just, everybody should sign the waiver. Like, you want to live on this planet? You're living under an AI god.
No. All right. So I do think it's helpful. So the Society of Automotive Engineers has worked with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to define the levels of driving automation so that we can keep track of where companies are and what your car actually does. There's some official stuff that you can go and read as how they're starting to try to regulate all of this. So level 0, there's no driving automation at all. You have to do everything your normal car. Level 1 is driving assistance. And I think this is like what my car has. Like it'll try to see the lanes on the road for you and help you avoid, if you're falling asleep, it'll try to put you back into the center lane. Like it's helpful for you, but you still have to basically drive your car. Level 2 is partial automation. And so this is where you can have 2 or more functions at once. So this is also my car, I think is probably level 2 because I do have the radar assisted cruise control. So it will basically drive itself and keep me in the center lanes. I can go on, a 4-hour highway mostly drive and my foot's on the brake, but not actually pressing it until something happens because the car is keeping me a safe distance from the car in front of me and keeping me in the right lane. I will say that's also a thing I fully abuse. I've been in rental cars that don't have that, and I realize I have fully gotten used to. I can just set the cruise control speed to like 80 and then just constantly be behind whatever car is in front of me. And if that car is doing 75, I'm doing 75 a safe distance away. I don't know. It's really super convenient to have a level 2 car, actually. Level 3 is apparently called conditional driving automation, where it can drive itself in select scenarios. And that includes, the full control. It is fully in control at that point, but you as a driver would need to take over if it's a situation. So kind of like what I was just saying, but more fully automated, usually on a highway, because that's both good and bad. On the highway, the risk is, I don't know, lower technically because there's not a pedestrian crossing in front of you on a highway and you're not making a bunch of turns. But at the same time, the pain if you're wrong is probably worse on a highway. So that one's a little weird to me.
Yeah, this one, I'm not sure if it's level 2 or level 3 on my Audi. I have a problem with reversing out of the driveway, and I think it's because it's not a steep driveway, but I think because of the hill, like my car will occasionally detect an object behind, so it applies
Right.
the brakes.
Yes, right.
Which is really frustrating where maybe 1 out of 10 times when I'm reversing out of the driveway, it will actually stop me from reversing. And I'm like, stop.
Yep.
I'm in control.
And if your computer vision isn't good enough and it sees an obstacle that isn't there and it slams on the brakes while you're doing 70 on the highway and the car behind you rear ends you, not great. Level 4, I don't know really the difference. Level 4 and level 5, high driving automation versus full driving automation. Yeah, they're saying every once in a while in level 4, a driver input is still needed, and then level 5 is true self-driving. And I'm not sure why the need is there for the distinction other than giving some companies an out. I would imagine maybe federal government's regulation over level 5 is going to be much more severe than level 4, as long as you can say, well, the human is sitting in the driver's seat and still has the 2 pedals and a steering wheel, then maybe, I don't know, I'd be curious why we need the distinction between 4 and 5.
It's weird actually too. I'm not sure if it's a setting, but when I've got my Tesla full automation, I'm guessing, or when it's driving itself, I have to keep my hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah, mine's got it detects if you have a grip on the steering wheel
Yeah.
or not to make sure that a human being's actually in the seat responsive
But
to what it
then
needs to do.
maybe that's the difference then, because I've also seen people reading books while they're in their Tesla. So
Sure.
either that's the difference between like a level 4 and level 5, or it's a setting, right?
Maybe, right. All right. So I think there was a couple of years ago a really fascinating thought experiment that someone put forth to try to help people appreciate the weird situation you're going to find yourself in with self-driving cars. So this one is ethically gray for everyone involved: the software developers, the hardware engineers, the sellers of the self-driving car, the drivers of the self-driving car. So the scenario was you are driving along the highway and a piece of debris suddenly falls into the highway, and the car has 3 possible choices. Well, 4 has 4 possible choices. Let the car hit the debris. It's clearly not going to do that. That would be bad for you and the car. The next choice is to swerve to the left. And if you swerve to the left, you hit a minivan. And the computer has recognized there's at least a couple of people in the minivan. Statistically likely, you're talking about a family of, 3 or more people are going to be in a minivan. And the computer has to decide, do I hit the minivan and drive the minivan into oncoming traffic? If I swerve right, I'm going to hit a bus full of children. So do I swerve into the bus full of children and let the car kill everybody on the bus by driving them off the side of the road? Or I guess the third and the fourth and the first are the same, which is, or I take the action that kills the driver of the car that is making the decision. And the ethical question is, in a trolley problem situation, you should take 1 life, not 3 and not 20. But no one is going to buy a car, and you're shaking your head because you're a Republican, no one's going to buy a car whose ethical systems are going to kill you. But then, if you're a software engineer who programs that decision, the survivors of the family in the minivan or the parents of the kids on the bus are going to sue you for making a choice. And so now you need to be legally protected. Why should we? It gets hairy and bad. And I know you don't care about human beings, so you don't actually mind this problem. But if I'm a software engineer working at Tesla, you got to be a little bit concerned that somewhere you wrote a piece of code that killed 3 people. That's bad.
No, this is a ridiculous. This is a ridiculous.
This is a
Problem.
scenario that absolutely happens, and human beings make it every day.
No, like I'm sorry, but anybody who's in the midst of crashing is not thinking to themselves, should I hit the school bus, or should I hit the minivan, or should I hit this, or should I hit that? I've been in an accident where I'm spinning out and you're not thinking of anything. You're thinking of you're not even thinking about oh, I should turn my wheels into the skid, right? Like,
That's what I'm saying is we don't have to face this now as our own drivers. The human brain does not have the time to make that analysis. I
Yeah.
do think the human brain does have the time to recognize and hope it remembers that to my right is not a car and to my left is a car. That kind of decision making is happening. You are, not all the time, but there are cases where your reaction is fast enough to remember, oh, I should go right, not left, because you're aware of your surroundings around you. You are making some of those decisions. And so the problem is,
you ever seen the guys on the highway? You know the regular commuters, and and here's my challenge, right? Is I've been in the traffic, and I used to do that commute 10 years driving into Boston. There's a particular type of driver who they drive too close to the car in front, as we all do, by the
Yes.
way, right? It's commuter
No,
traffic, so
I
you're going
don't.
really
I
fast.
I
No, no,
do not do
but
that. But
but
yeah,
commuters do for the most
they're
part, right?
monsters. Yes. We'll get to the pros and cons of this, and one of the pros is humans suck.
And
Yes.
what they do is when the traffic slams on, they're not ready. And so they have this natural instinctive reaction that they've trained themselves to do, which is to turn into the lay-by.
Yeah.
To miss the car in front that they're going to rear end. And I guarantee you, regardless of what's on either side of them, those people are now, through habit, trained that if the car in front of me slams on, I'm going to execute this maneuver, right? So I actually think we're more dangerous than the logic because we've trained ourselves.
You're missing the point. You're arguing the point I'm not making. I'm agreeing with you that human beings
Suck.
don't always make a logical decision. I will disagree with you a little bit. There are cases where you're aware of your surroundings. If you're a good driver, fine. There are assholes who commute. They shouldn't be on the road anyway. We're not disagreeing over that. But you don't get to apply those people to all drivers. There are plenty of good drivers who are making relatively okay decisions in that point, and most of us don't make a good decision. We just panic and do whatever happens.
Yeah.
Like I'm fully agreeing that people are bad in this situation. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that's okay because we're human beings, and there is no, unless you were drunk, unless you had food in your hand, like if there are reasons why you could be held legally culpable for a bad decision, but most of the time we recognize that it's just crap that goes wrong when you're driving. What I'm saying is there is an ethical question for the software people involved that you have to program that choice. You are making a choice. You are not going to let the car panic. You're going to have the car make a choice. And so now, as soon as you program a choice, the next question is going to be from somebody, why did you program left versus right? Well, I had the car radar system look around me and there was no one in the right lane. Great. What do you do if there's someone in the right lane and the left lane? Okay, well, the car that was in the left lane was a semi-truck and the car that was in the right lane was a sedan. So the best path for me and the driver is going to the sedan rather than going to the semi-truck. These are all things that a software programmer has to choose to do, and that is hairy, sticky, ethical situations. How are you shaking your head at me?
I think it's glorious. I would much rather drive knowing that the software is applying some logic to the accident than no logic, because I could, like, in an accident.
Again, you're missing the point. I don't care whether you think that's a good choice or a bad choice. It's smarter than the human being. When the sedan that you drove off the road because the computer made the choice not to kill the driver by hitting in the semi-truck, then why? This country is full, you hate lawsuits. This country is full of lawsuits. You are opening up, and you should have an ethical concern as a software engineer why you made the choice to drive the sedan off the road, and the lawyers are certainly going to come for you when you made the ethical choice to drive the sedan off the road. You killed 3 people to save 1 life.
But the answer to that is to change the law, not to change the software.
I think you're going to have a hard time with that.
I like to think that we'll get to the point where the software also, we can start to track the KPIs of, cool, yes, I killed the people in the sedan, but I actually saved 7 lives by not hitting the school bus. And that we never get that today, right? We don't get those, oh yeah, 2 people died, but it could have been worse, right? Software will get us to the point where it's like, we can actually quantify. That's great. Pretty good. There's a high probability that 7 people die in this accident, but the software kept it to 2. That's beautiful.
That's what I'm saying. It's an actual literal trolley problem. That is the definition of the trolley problem.
But that's good.
No one should be in the position of actually solving the point of the trolley problem is you shouldn't solve the trolley problem.
No, you have to. That's the brave future we need to have. It's the same decision that Skynet makes, right? Like, the only way to stop the humans and protect ourselves is to eliminate them all, right? Like, you want that decision in the system. You need that.
Good luck going to sleep at night if you're the person who has to write that code, and good luck not getting your pantsuit off of you by the family of the sedan people.
That's the problem. We need to change the law.
No. It's bad.
Yeah. We need to change that. It's become too easy to sue people. Look at the McDonald's, the hot coffee thing.
We are not relitigating how wrong you are about the McDonald's thing.
I just needed to see you get, like...
I'll have to find what episode that rant is in and insert that later and tell people to go listen to the McDonald's rant.
I'm pretty sure it started with, do you know what the vulva is?
Do you think that was part of the conversation? Kevin from the future, while editing this episode, just popping in to say that discussion about the how everyone is wrong about the McDonald's lawsuit is in episode 13, where we talk about a bunch of different software failures and get into it as we're talking about whether or not there are too many lawsuits. Anyways, back to the episode. All right, so the horrifying ethics of this situation are insurmountable, and I don't know how we will ever get past them, but cool. Imagine a cool future where we do. What are the pros and cons of self-driving cars? I think, obviously, the pros are everything we've talked about in how bad human beings are at doing this task that we've turned into a fundamental piece of life. I do think this is where the liberal side of me would point out that we shouldn't have this dependence on cars. If mass transit were helping a bunch of people, we could just simply take a bunch of people off the road, because being dependent on cars is also ridiculous. You have to have a car to have most jobs these days. There is an insane over-reliance on this thing when we could be investing a ton of this money into just getting people from Waltham to Boston, which is why the Green Line needs an investment on its own. For anybody who's in Boston knows the Green Line's the worst one, but mass transit would solve a bunch of problems. I recognize that most of this country is not designed for mass transit, and a lot of people aren't willing to give up the freedom of having a car. So yes, human beings being terrible drivers is a sizable pro for all of this. You want to list any other pros before I tell you why it's terrible?
No, I mean, the big pro for me, right, is once the entire network is in place, then you've got Autobahn-like qualities, right? Like now,
Sure.
what do you guys call it? Zip merging, traffic on, cars are going much faster. I'm changing lanes dynamically. I don't have to wake up the person stuck in the left lane anymore because they're just
Right.
sitting out there. They're gonna get auto moved to the slow lane. Like, oh, so glorious. Positive impact on the environment because there's less cars, because just massive change thanks to the software.
There would be a massive change to the environment if mass transit were invested in, but that's fine.
Hmm.
So the con is all of the ethical concerns, all of the problems with bugs, and the fact that the software isn't there yet. And I know the software's not there yet because the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration had a report out that there were an average of 9.1 crashes from driverless vehicles per million vehicles, and only 4.2 of conventional drivers out of a million vehicles. So it's a 2023 report, I believe. I think there's also a 2022 study on advanced driver assistance systems, like the type of stuff that's in the non-self-driving cars, like the Lexus lane keep assist and radar assisted cruise control, and more than 2/3 of those were from Tesla. 273 of those crashes from Tesla in 2022. So I'm just not convinced that the algorithms are there yet. I'm fully on board with this in a mass transit, truly fully tested software future. I think all of the reasons why this is good are still good. The software's just not there. It's just not ready for prime time. And you can argue that part of the reason it's not ready for prime time is because not all the cars are networked. And so some of these accidents are almost certainly because of the masshole who accelerated when it saw the turn signal and decided to cut you off from moving in. I'm not disagreeing with that, but that's a chicken and egg problem that I don't know how you solve. And the way you probably solve it is another 10 years on closed courses. Maybe it's 5 years on closed courses. The technology is evolving quickly, but it's not there.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, the numbers are, that there's alternate facts here, right?
Okay, Kellyanne. Sure, let's hear it.
So even if the numbers are accurate, right, and you got your numbers there, I'm fine with them. I mean, exactly.
You have no argument. Right. No, it's the safety isn't there yet. You're willing to kill people in order to get to a future.
Yeah. I just hope that in 1 or 2 years, when the software is
Yeah,
good
sure.
enough,
1 or 2.
1 or 2 years, when the software is good enough, people will recognize not only the dramatic drop in the number of deaths from automated vehicles, but the life-saving capabilities of automated vehicles too. Like quite literally being able to detect a crash and hit the sedan instead of the school bus. That is 5 lives saved. So it's actually it's not just going to reduce the number of accidents and deaths, it's actually going to save lives. That's new, right? Like we don't go out in the morning driving and be like, I'm going to save a life today, but the software will.
If the software truly was interested in saving lives, it would kill the driver. 3 in the sedan.
That's a philosophical problem. problem?
This is what I'm telling you. This entire problem is a philosophical ethical problem. You have if the software is making life balancing choices and it has 10 in the bus, 3 in the sedan, 1 in the car. And is the software looking inside? What if it's 4 in the car, 3 in the sedan, 20 on the bus, right? Like, when does the software start to make those choices?
Well,
You're right, it's a philosophical problem, and I don't want Elon Musk being the ethical philosophical winner.
yeah, but there can be an agreed set upon like rules, right? For example, the driver of the car is 86. That's a no-brainer. That should be applied, right? The software's like, kill the driver.
So you want death panels, which all of you Republicans freaked out about in 2010 when Obamacare didn't introduce death panels, but you all lied to everybody and said that death panels were happening. So you're fully on board with a software death panel.
I mean, I am. You know, it's like my rules today. I think unless there should be windows of commuters too, right? Like unless you're taking a kid to school or you're going to work, you should not be on the road between 8 a.m. and 9:30.
Sure, right.
Right? Like just somebody needs to step up. That's not a software problem. That's a human problem. It's Americans like, oh, don't take away my freedoms. You know, like all cars should be chipped. All humans should be chipped. Like I should know who's in the vehicle and I should know where the vehicles are, all of the vehicles. And yeah, part of that decision is this person, what's the credit score of this person in the car? Are they worth saving? That's the society we need to get to.
Horrifying.
It's not horrifying.
It's Soylent Green. It is every sci-fi dystopian movie warning you not to do it. This is that Twitter meme.
They're not
where
warning
it's the
us
thing.
not to do
They are
it.
absolutely warning us to do that. What is that Twitter meme?
They're not warning us not to do it. They're saying if you do it, make sure it's not dark and gray.
Yeah, it's the Twitter meme of the sci-fi author who says, in my book, I invented the torment nexus as a cautionary tale. And then a tech company shows up and says, at long last, we have created the torment nexus from classic sci-fi novel, Don't Create the Torment Nexus. Like, you are defining the things that all dystopian books, movies, TV shows, everything have told you not to do, which is...
But this is the problem I have with humanity, right? Like a lot of people will look at me and say, that's because you're on the spectrum. And I'm like, no, it's because I'm applying the same logic the system would. Like if I gave them 3 humans to save, the robot only has the same logic that we have, that we seem to have a problem with, right? I can save the baby, I can save the old person, or I can save the person midlife, right? So right away, those 3 people have an attribute that has to be considered. One is this person is half done, this person is 90% done, and this person is only 5% done.
Isn't contributing yet in the salt mines, so we don't really need to worry about that baby, actually.
That's a second, that's a second level, right? Which is what state of society are we in today? Because then the middle-aged person is contributing to society and the other 2 are not.
It's the most Republican thing in the world to boil life down to whether or not you contribute yet to society. Being the pro-life party and yet the baby's credit score hasn't built up enough. I mean, the fetus's credit score would be so low you'd be pro-abortion.
Well, that's not true though, because there are things the parents could have done before birth that bulked the credit score of that baby. They could have got credit cards out in that baby's name and blah, 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 blah,
so
blah.
the poor people are allowed to have abortions, but rich people can't? It's not how the system works today, actually. It's usually the other way around.
And trust me, there's a lot more decisions go into whether it's the baby, the old person, or the middle-aged person. I'm just saying that we have a problem, right? We're making these very logical decisions because of ethical ethics.
That's human existence. That is every story that's told. Where do you come down on? So when you watch, okay, this is a wild reference to use, but when you watch White House Down, which you complain about, they make the same movie all over and over again. Did you see Olympus Has Fallen?
Yeah,
they made the same movie twice. White House Down has Jamie Foxx maybe as basically President Obama stand-in, and the terrorists capture the White House, and in White House Down, they threaten to kill a little child. And Jamie Foxx, as the president, says, it's either your life or humanity, because if I give them the nuclear codes, it's World War III and we all die. So I'm willing to sacrifice the little girl's life to save the 8 billion people on the planet. Versus in Olympus Has Fallen, they're all captured by terrorists in the White House and they have to make that choice. And the president, in order to save the 85-year-old life of his Secretary of Defense, caves and gives them the nuclear code. And depending on who you are, you watch that movie and you have two very different reactions. You either think the president being willing to kill the girl is good or bad, or you think the president not being willing to kill the Secretary of Defense is good or bad. But that is human experience. We live in these ethical conundrums and we have these debates, and you're saying you get to pick a winner and we get to code the winning philosophy into this software. And I don't think humanity works that way. I don't think we actually want those answers. The whole point of human existence is to debate those answers and to not have that answer and to let it be, depending on the situation and depending on who's in charge and depending on all of those things. You're deciding to be a dictator and choosing human philosophy that's never gone well in the history of humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
bad.
agree
It's
with you at the
Machiavellian.
end, but everything else I couldn't disagree with you more on, because it's like, yeah, we absolutely have to have somebody to make those decisions and write the software that makes it. It's easy, right? Like, let me paint this one. That's an easy decision. There's
Sure.
20 of us that survive a plane crash, and there's enough food for 10 of us to survive. We just know that. There's no hunting. There's enough food for 10 of us. The old people are gotta go, right? But now you have to start measuring that value. Like, well, but he's a doctor, she's a scientist, or she knows enough about ocean science that if we try to get off the island, this person is useful. So yeah, next oldest person in line. Oh, you're what? Oh, that's no good. There are no chemists here, so you're gone. Humanity does need to get logical with who survives and who does not.
That is all of, you need to stop skip tenning through all of the media that you consume. That is exactly those choices. That is exactly the thing that makes it that it's entirely situationally dependent, and you shouldn't have God doesn't exist. He's not coming down and dictating these things and forcing you to behave a certain way. You have free will. You do the things that you want to. Humanity makes these choices in those situations. Spoilers for the Yellow Jackets TV show, which has been on for 2 seasons, but they leave it up to fate. They pull cards from a deck of cards and they don't do that evaluation. And that is equally horrifying. Both are bad. Both are good. There is no correct answer there. It's entire, like, that is the thing, is I feel like I'm explaining humanity at its core. Like,
I know
that is the whole point. Is
but you're explaining humanity like it's like the authority, right? Like we.
No, I'm saying there is no authority. That's exactly the point. There is no authority. You're trying to.
But there should be.
No, that's the problem. You don't get, like, that's dictatorship. That is the absence of free will. At that point, the machine should just read your DNA, figure out what job you should have, let you have that job for 40 years until you're no longer contributing, and then we turn you into Soylent Green and feed you to the people who are hungry. That's a bleak dystopian future. I need you to stop skipping 10 through movies that tell you that this is bad, actually.
I was confusing because I was like, why is he like explaining utopia right now? I was like, what? Wait a minute, is he on the same page as me now?
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the ones we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. You can also follow us on most apps. We're at AcceptancePod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there. We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptance criteria and on Discord. You can find links to both in the show notes and on the blog. And I promise we'll be moderating the crap out of them to keep it a nice little slice of the internet, unlike Twitter today. For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at KThomasEuland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.